What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. We got some major news here, and I'm going to let you hear it directly here from House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, leader of the Republicans, and they're going to pass a major bill here. And this is actually a little bit of trouble here, and I'll let you know why here. But first, I'm going to let you hear directly from Kevin McCarthy here and why this is going to be a major issue and why the Democrats are a little bit disturbed about this here because you remember here the debt limit and the debt ceiling has already been passed here. The $31.4 trillion of debt that our country here already has and is already passed here. And the negotiations have not been going well here in our country. And the U.S. could default if they don't do anything here, the first ever default of our country, which would literally mean an economic collapse of our country. And we've heard even the president say, and politicians, even Senator Bernie Sanders has said previously, this could delay Social Security payments and could delay any type of money coming out of the government because they would not have any money. They won't be able to print any money. And here's what Kevin McCarthy had to say here today. Take a listen to this, and then I'll tell you what this means here afterwards. Very big news.
I want to talk to you about the debate that is not happening in Washington, but should be happening over our national debt. It's a debate that directly affects the lives of every single American. America deserves to hear the truth. So I'm going to start just with the facts. Our national debt is too high, far too high. And the problem is getting worse, not better. We are now $31 trillion in debt. That's more than the entire economy of America, 20% more. Think for a moment. That is unsustainable. Over the next 10 years, the United States will pay $10.5 trillion just in interest on our debt. Put that in perspective. Since 1940 until today, we have paid $9 trillion of interest on our total debt. Over 83 years, $9 trillion. And now we're going to pay 10.5 and 10. If our lifetimes, these interest payments are on track to crowd out and eventually eclipse the vital programs like Social Security and Medicare. And let me repeat, far from protecting these vital programs, as the president says he will, President Biden's extreme spending threatens to crush them with debt and economic decay. Without exaggeration, American debt is a ticking time bomb that will detonate unless we take serious, responsible action. Yet, how has President Biden reacted to this issue? He has done nothing. So in my view, I think in the rest of America, that's irresponsible. Rather than face the facts, this president has embraced a fantasy that debt doesn't matter, that money can always be created out of thin air, and that the solution to higher prices caused by reckless spending is just higher taxes. In 2 short years, President Biden, along with the Democrats in Congress, have added $6 trillion to our national debt burden, which created inflation, made us more dependent on China, and has undermined Medicare and Social Security. Today, it's the American people who are left paying the price. Americans have received a pay cut for 24 consecutive months. The longest streak in American history as inflation has just persisted. In fact, since President Biden took office, families have lost the equivalent of $7,400 worth of income. Nearly 6 in 10 Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make ends meet. For young families, Biden's inflation means home ownership is moving further and further away. For our seniors, Biden's inflation means a lifetime of retirement savings are being ravaged. And now we see the collapse of the largest bank since the Great Recession. It's a direct result of incompetent bank supervision and the negative effects of constantly fighting President Biden's inflation. It is basic economics that when Washington prints more and more money, prices go up and purchasing power comes down. As my favorite economist, Milton Friedman, said it more than 50 years ago, inflation is made in Washington. Yet rather than working with Republicans to find a reasonable agreement to tame inflation, provide certainty to the economy, President Biden is demanding that Congress make room for new debt without a single sensible change to how government spends your hard-earned money. Not one change. My question to you today, does that sound responsible? Let me put it this way. If you gave your child a credit card and they kept maxing it out to the limit, would you just blindly raise the limit? Of course not. Not one parent would do that. You'd be responsible for paying the bill, but you would sit down. You'd work with them to figure out how they could change their spending habits so it never happens again. That exact same thing is true for our national debt. Debt limit negotiations are an opportunity to examine our nation's finances. Now, in the past 35 years, there has been 8 major deficit reduction laws enacted by Congress. Every single one of them was attached to legislation that raised the debt limit, and every one of them was bipartisan. Why? Because the problem gets solved only when both parties come together. Now, when he was Senator Joe Biden, he voted for spending reforms attached to debt limit increases 4 times. In 1985, in 1987, in 1993, and in 1997. And on those other occasions, when he opposed raising the debt limit, it was because he said the deficit reduction measures were not enough to justify debt limit increases. To quote Senator Biden, his opposition to raising the debt limit in 2004 was a protest of the policies that have brought us to this point and a demand that we change course. What changed, Joe? As Vice President, Biden led the talks on spending restraints in 2011 debt negotiations. During those negotiations, which we actually called the Biden Group, he passionately made the case for negotiating in good faith. To again quote then Vice President Biden, he said, "You can't govern without negotiating." What changed, Mr. President? I agree with the former sensible Joe Biden. He knew that our government is designed to find compromise. I just wish the current extreme Joe Biden would listen to the former Joe Biden too. I met with President Biden at the White House on February 1st, 75 days ago. During our meeting, I told the president clearly, let's find a way to come to an agreement, like we have before. Had the president agreed to negotiate in good faith, we'd already be done. Unfortunately, I have not heard from the White House since our very first meeting. President Biden has been missing in action and misleading the public. Mr. President, with all due respect, enough is enough. This is not how the leader of the free world should act. Your partisan political games are provoking the very crisis you claim to avoid. Greater dependency on China, increasing inflation, and threatening Medicare and Social Security. Even members of his own party think this approach is extreme. Democrat Senator Joe Manchin recently said, "Recent actions make clear to me that the Biden administration is determined to pursue ideological agenda." Senator Manchin is right. Make no mistake, the longer President Biden waits to be sensible, to find an agreement, the more likely it becomes that this administration will bumble into the first default in our nation's history. Addressing the debt requires us to come together, find common ground, and reduce spending. Let me be clear, defaulting on our debt is not an option. But neither is a future of higher taxes, higher interest rates, more dependency on China, an economy that doesn't work for working Americans. Let me be clear. A no strings attached debt limit increase will not pass. But since the president continues to hide, House Republicans will take action. Okay, so here's our plan. In the coming weeks, the House will vote on a bill to lift the debt ceiling into the next year. Save taxpayers trillions of dollars, make us less dependent upon China, curb our high inflation, all without touching Social Security and Medicare. Simply put, it puts it on a fiscal responsible path in three ways. It limits, it saves, and it grows. First, we'll limit federal spending. You know, in the past 2 years, discretionary spending in Washington has exploded by more than 17%. That's faster than GDP growth or even inflation. And keep in mind, the new spending does not include the trillions of dollars of COVID-era spending. From 2011 to 2021, the federal government operated under spending caps. Though these caps were occasionally raised through debt limit negotiations, they were largely successful. Discretionary spending flatlined and overall spending growth slowed dramatically. Our legislation accomplishes the same goal by returning the federal government to 2022 levels. And then limit the growth of spending over the next 10 years to 1% of annual growth. Now, don't believe anyone who tells you these are draconian limits. Think about it. They're the same spending levels we had just 4 months ago. Just last October. Well, that's 7 months. And make sure that our veterans and our service members are taken care of. But the bloated, overgrown bureaucracy that has expanded under President Biden needs to be pruned. And that's exactly what we'll do. If Washington wants to spend more, it'll have to come together to find savings elsewhere.
Okay, so he goes on for another like half an hour or so. So to give you the lowdown here, the quick and skinny, the Republicans are going to vote to raise the debt ceiling. This might sound good to you. You might sound really excited here about this. The problem with this is the Democrats have already said they're going to vote no on this because This is a Republican plan only. This has not been negotiated between the Republicans and the Democrats. And if you know anything about politics, it's it's really not how things get done. Kevin McCarthy actually mentioned it in his speech that all debt limit plans have to come together on a bipartisan basis. This is a Republican plan. So I'm actually, to be honest, everything he mentioned actually sounds pretty good. He's a very convincing speaker, to be honest. At least you can let me know your thoughts here in the comments. But there are going to be a lot of cuts, It's interesting what he said about the Senator Joe Biden. You can let me know your thoughts here. Now that he's President Joe Biden, see, the thing about presidents, and this kind of happened to former President Trump. Before Trump was president, he said that he was going to cut the fiscal deficit. But when he became president, he added about $8 trillion to the deficit. See, this is where people, when they're on the campaign trail, it's easier said than done. Former President Donald Trump, before he was president, said that he was going to cut the fiscal deficit. And when he became president, he added $8 trillion to the deficit. Senator Biden, you heard what Kevin McCarthy said there about the former Senator Biden. For the years and years and years, he was a fiscal deficit hawk. He wanted to, for years, he voted on, tightening up the budget 4 different times. And the other times that he didn't vote on tightening up the budget, it was because they didn't tighten up the budget enough. But now that he's president, similar to when former President Donald Trump was president, very odd that you could actually compare the two and they can be similar. They both wanted to spend more. It's kind of like that quote from the movie Contact. What's the number one rule of government spending? Why buy one when you could buy 2 at twice the price? No, it's not the exact quote, but it's pretty close. It's very true, because the reality of it is that when you're a president, if you can spend, you're popular. If you cut, you're not. Think about if you cut SNAP benefits from people, you just pissed off a lot of people. If you raise SNAP benefits for people, you've made a lot of people happy. If you can give student loan forgiveness to 40 million people, you made 40 million people happy. If you can help people out in any way with money, you help them out. Think about the millions of people that former President Donald Trump helped out with the executive order, with the checks that went out to unemployed Americans. He helped out millions of people, and millions of people were instantly happy. That was before the one of the previous elections. I think it was 2020, something like that. Boom! Instantly, millions of people were happy. Think about this, and remember that the first stimulus package was passed by underneath former President Donald Trump. That was the largest one ever. It was over $2 trillion alone. Again, boom, one shot, $2 trillion. So again, you kind of think about all these different things. Spending makes a happy economy, a happy Wall Street, happy people, and cutting. Where do you cut from? Do you cut from the military? Do you cut from people's benefits? Do you cut from Social Security? Do you cut from Medicare? Where do you cut from? There's only so many places to cut from, and eventually it has to come from people's benefits. There's only so many places to cut from. We're going to find out here what the Republican plan is and where the cuts are going to come from. I'll keep you up to date here. Now, it might not pass on the first try because Democrats are probably going to hate it. They're already coming out and saying this. But it's a first step on where the negotiations are going to fall from and what the Republican plan outline is. So you can let me know your thoughts here on this. I'll keep you up to date here. This will lead to, hopefully, eventually where we get to passing a bill without a default. Hopefully. Because that's the worst thing that could ever happen. Yeah, and this will show us where the cuts might eventually come from, because Republicans are saying that they're not going to pass a bill without some cuts, because just look at the interest we're paying alone on our country and the trillions of dollars. In fact, if we don't cut anything, I think it's in 10 years, our fiscal deficit is going to be over $51 trillion. $51 trillion. Yeah, it's nice to be a president, whether you're Trump or Biden, and just spend, 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 and spend, and make everybody happy, make the country happy. Problem is that we can't just keep printing money and keep having inflation, keep having our dollar devalued. If you watch my recent video on that, our dollar getting devalued, it's not going good. We can't keep continuing to do this forever. So let me know your thoughts. I'll keep it up to date here. In fact, I'll link you to our video about the dollar being devalued here in a second here. Make sure to subscribe down below to our YouTube channel. It's completely free to do so. And I'll keep you up to date here on what is going to happen here with this situation and everything else going on here in our country on a daily basis. Thanks for liking and sharing these videos as well. Here's some videos you should watch next. Here's that video on the US dollar being devalued right here. And here's what both China and Russia just did, which is crazy. So click on one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.